Three men. Same era. Same city. Same profession. One died broke. One died fighting for money he was owed for most of his career. One died rich at 37. All three are remembered today as geniuses, but the difference between how their lives actually ended had almost nothing to do with talent. It came down to something far less romantic and far more brutal. In 1482, a 30-year-old painter sat down to write a job application to the Duke of Milan. He listed 10 skills he could offer. 9 of them were military engineering: bridges, siege machines, armored vehicles, ways to divert a river during a siege. Right at the bottom, almost as an afterthought, he added one more line. Also, I can paint. The man was Leonardo da Vinci. He understood exactly what a duke needed to hear, and painting wasn't it. That single line at the bottom explains everything about how the Renaissance actually worked, but only once you understand the world he was applying into. Painters at this point weren't seen as artists at all, because the word didn't exist yet. They belonged to the apothecary guild, the same guild as chemists and pharmacists, because they used similar tools to grind and mix their pigments. The term used for them was craftsman. No mystique, no genius label, no separate category above tradesman. You trained, you joined a guild, you waited for someone with money to hire you. So if painters weren't artists yet, who actually held the power in this world? The contract did. A Renaissance painting commission wasn't a handshake between an inspired artist and an admiring patron. It was a legal document, specifying subject, price, deadline, and often even a sketch of the exact composition expected. The material clauses are where it gets strange. Contracts routinely named the exact pigments required, because pigments varied wildly in cost. The most expensive of all was ultramarine blue, ground from lapis lazuli shipped in from Afghanistan. It cost more per ounce than gold. A patron paying for Madonna's robe wanted proof, in writing, of exactly how much of it he was buying. And these contracts got even stranger once a patron simply refused to pay. Disputes were common enough that guild courts existed just to handle them. Artists sued patrons for non-payment. Patrons sued artists for late work or cut corners. And payment itself was usually staggered: an advance up front, installments during the process, and a final sum held back until the patron approved the final piece. That last payment was leverage, and the patron kept it until the very end. Now, imagine surviving inside a system like that, with no permanent employer, no steady salary, which is exactly where Leonardo stood when he wrote that letter to Milan. Before all this, the church was almost the sole patron of art in Europe. Paintings existed to serve God. Altarpieces, chapel walls, devotional scenes. The artist behind them barely mattered. Most medieval works survive with no name attached at all, because the point was never the maker. It was the devotion. The Renaissance didn't end that arrangement. The church kept commissioning art throughout the entire period, but it wasn't the only door open anymore. As Florence's merchant class grew wealthy, a new kind of buyer emerged. private families who wanted art for themselves, not for God. A portrait, a family chapel, sometimes the patron's own face painted into the crowd of a biblical scene. This wasn't vanity for its own sake. It was signaling. Much like a diploma signals quality in a job candidate today, a Michelangelo signature on your chapel told everyone exactly how much you were worth. Still, none of that compared to the one prize every artist actually wanted. The highest form of patronage was a seat inside a royal court. A duke, a king, eventually a pope. That meant a salary, a studio, a place to live, real security. It also meant you belonged to that ruler completely. On call for pageants, fortifications, festival designs, whatever was needed that week. Lorenzo de' Medici took this further than anyone. He brought his favorite artists into his own household, fed them at his table, treated them as equals. The young Michelangelo grew up eating at that table. But Lorenzo was the exception. Getting this prize was rare. Keeping it was rarer, and the numbers prove it. Between 1495 and 1498, Leonardo spent 3 years painting the Last Supper on a refectory wall in Milan. Through most of his career, his income ran between 50 and 100 ducats per year, roughly the value of one painting. To the Duke who commissioned this one, it was wall decoration for a dining hall, not a landmark in the making. Compare that to what happened on a much larger ceiling, 400 miles south, where the pay was higher, but the price was steeper. Michelangelo spent 4 years on the Sistine Chapel ceiling, flat on scaffolding, paint dripping into his eyes, his spine permanently damaged by the posture. He was paid roughly 3,000 ducats total for the project, far less than Pope Julius II had originally promised, and spread across 4 years of near-constant physical strain. Julius was known for this pattern across his whole papacy. Grand promises up front, a smaller reality on delivery. Michelangelo fought him over the gap for years. Now put Raphael next to both of these men. His story breaks the pattern completely. Raphael never wrote begging letters, and unlike Leonardo and Michelangelo, there's no single salary figure attached to his name. His wealth shows up differently, in property records and workshop size. By his late 20s, he was running one of the largest workshops in Rome, juggling major commissions for 2 successive popes at once. Late in his career, he was confident enough in his own value to quote 90,000 ducats for a single engineering job, moving an ancient obelisk to St. Peter's Square. Same century, same profession, 3 completely different endings. And the gap starts with what Leonardo wrote next. The letters survive. Here is Leonardo, writing to his own employer, the Duke of Milan. My lord, knowing the mind of your excellency to be occupied, I am writing to remind your lordship of my small matters. I have still to receive 2 years' salary. I have been working to gain my living. The single greatest mind of the Renaissance, reduced to a polite, anxious request to be paid what he was owed. This wasn't a one-time complaint. It went on like this for years. It got worse before it got better. In 1499, the French invaded Milan, and the Duke fled. Leonardo lost his stipend, his studio, his patron. everything he'd built over 17 years, gone in a matter of weeks. He returned to Florence to start over, took a job as a military cartographer for Cesare Borgia, and drifted between courts for years. In Rome, the Pope even ordered him to stop performing dissections, one of his deepest intellectual passions. He wandered for years before he found somewhere that asked nothing of him. King Francis I gave Leonardo a castle, a salary of 1,000 gold ducats a year, and a title, the King's Painter. He also gave him something no Italian patron ever had: freedom. Leonardo wasn't required to produce anything. He was paid simply to think, to talk, to be Leonardo. He spent his last 3 years in France and finished almost nothing, and by most accounts was happier than at any other point in his life. While Leonardo finally found peace, Michelangelo was going to war with his own patron. At 21, Michelangelo carved a sculpture, artificially aged it, and sold it to a cardinal as a genuine ancient Roman antique. When the cardinal discovered the truth, he wasn't angry. He was impressed enough to help launch Michelangelo's career. It was a lesson Michelangelo never forgot. This world ran on reputation and perception as much as skill. That one scheme taught him something Leonardo never learned. By the time Pope Julius II came calling, Michelangelo had built enough of a name to push back. He argued over payment, over scope, over control of his own work. Twice he walked off the Sistine project entirely, and twice Julius came after him to bring him back. A pope chasing down a painter was almost unheard of. Michelangelo had flipped the entire relationship on its head. You'd think that kind of power meant he finally won. He didn't. Julius II had commissioned Michelangelo to build his tomb, a project Michelangelo considered his life's masterpiece and returned to obsessively for decades. After Julius died, his heirs fought over the contract for years. The design shrank. Parts were cancelled, revived, cut again. What was finally built bore almost no resemblance to what Michelangelo had originally designed. He called it simply the tragedy of the tomb. Even the most powerful artist alive still lost to the same system that broke Leonardo. None of these three men got to make art on their own terms. Leonardo spent his life chasing patrons who barely paid him. Michelangelo was handed a commission he didn't even want, on a ceiling he had to fight for every ducat of. Raphael built his fortune by bending entirely to what his patrons demanded, on schedule, without complaint. And yet, the constraint is what produced the work. Michelangelo never asked to paint the Sistine ceiling. The Pope forced it on him, and the result is still considered the greatest painted surface in Western history. Leonardo's constant instability filled his notebooks with the observations and inventions historians now value as much as his paintings. Raphael's discipline under pressure is exactly what let him produce work of such clarity in so short a life. The money didn't get in the way of the art. It built it. 3 men, same profession, same century, 3 completely different relationships with money, and 3 completely different bodies of work because of it. Leonardo died uncertain, still holding on to the Mona Lisa, having never delivered it to anyone. Michelangelo died fighting for a legacy that was never built the way he intended. Raphael died young, wealthy, and at peace with the system the other 2 never mastered. None of them got the ending they might have chosen. All three left behind something none of us have forgotten. Which of these three would you have wanted to be? Let me know in the comments.